Hey, noble ones. Isn't it great that in this day and age where politically motivated twisting of events and data, we can at least have a reliable source of information when it comes to, for instance, academia and highly respected university bodies? Isn't that nice? Well, it would be nice if it were true, but it isn't true at all. CNN tells us reparations for slavery could have reduced COVID-19 transmission and deaths in the US. Harvard study says. 5 minutes read, it's gonna feel like 5 centuries read. Harvard study, and I would like to underline, guys, peer-reviewed. Allegedly peer-reviewed. Just so you know what you got yourself into when you clicked this video. I'm, of course, going to dismantle this to its very core. I'll destroy this. We're going to talk about reparations, and I'll tell you why I think it's absolute, complete, total nonsense. But most importantly, we will talk about the lack of academic neutrality, which we should find at high level of university these days, and instead, it's not, because it is a fact now that higher education and academia has become a cesspool for political indoctrination at the expense of coherent interpretation and data analysis. It's not about the facts anymore. It's all about pushing a message, and that's a fact. As you could see, unbelievable I have to say this, but this kind of headlines should not be associated with a Harvard peer-reviewed study. It should instead be associated with a Democratic convention in the United States. But the third thing we're going to say is not only this kind of talk is out of place when it comes to the academic circles, or it should be, at least in theory, but it's also deeply inappropriate at a moral level because it's exploiting emotional manipulation. So, strap in. CNN, COVID-19 is disproportionately sickening and killing Black Americans, the result of centuries of structural racism, a group of Harvard researchers says. If the US had paid reparations, the descendants of Black Americans who were enslaved, though the risk of severe illness and death from the virus would be far lower, according to a new peer-reviewed study by the researchers. This is even grammatically correct. Like, there is a problem with the consecutio tempore. Never mind syntax. The group of researchers from Harvard Medical School and the Lancet Commission on Reparations and Redistributive Justice. What on earth is this, by the way? Examined how reparations payments made before the pandemic would have affected Louisiana, a state that remains segregated in parts, and found that the payments could have reduced coronavirus transmission in the state anywhere between 31% to 68%. Why are they racially fixated? Why are they not care? This is ridiculous. Completely, utterly moronic. As the US approaches 1 year of living with COVID-19, Black Americans and other groups, including Hispanic and Native American people, are as much as 4 times more likely to be hospitalized than white Americans, data from the US Center of Disease Control and Prevention shows. Right, but even if this data was real, it has nothing to do with reparation. There is no connection whatsoever. No causality, no causal loop, no correlation, nothing. I know what some of you are going to say. Oh, but Metatron, this is for 2021. Why do you even care? I do care, and I would share this, even if it was, just in case you're confused. Let me make this one 1000% clear. If this was from 1321, deeply in the Middle Ages, I would have still shared it, because it is relevant today. In fact, if anything, things have got worse when it comes to anti-white racism within academia. So yes, I'm sharing it. Absolutely, I'm sharing it. And I'm clowning upon this. All right, before I continue with this nonsense, I'd like to kind of make my case very briefly. Not only I'm going to make a dedicated video onto slavery in history, showing you how ancient of a phenomenon it is, how it has nothing to do with white people, and in fact the only thing that it has to do with white people is the fact that we ended it, and that slavery that is not exclusive to white people. In fact, the only exclusive thing when it comes to slavery that has to do with white people is the fact that we were the ones that ended it. Also, I will tell you a lot about Muslim slavery, since That is meaning Islam and the kind of slavery connection that he had with slavery and the kind of type of slaves, because they never talk about that. I'll make a video about that. But before we do it, let's discuss this idea of reparations. So first and foremost, there is no need whatsoever for reparations from white people collectively, considering the fact that my ancestors, as far as I know, have never owned black slaves. I am white, a Nordic guy from Finland. What do they have to do with chattel slavery in the United States? Absolutely nothing. So already that is stupid, because they always tell you that white people don't exist as a concept, as a core. They say, no, it doesn't exist. It's Italians, Americans, French, German, until you talk about reparations. When it is reparations that are all of you, absolutely, you exist. In fact, this needs to pay reparations. My headphones need to pay reparations. Anything that is white is going to pay reparations. Anyways, that's the first thing. But in fact, the thing goes even deeper. Even if I had ancestors, or perhaps you have ancestors that did participate into the chattel slavery, so what? The idea of talking about reparations raises massive concerns about collective guilt for ancestral actions, which is an absolute nonsense. Because if you do that, then why are you singling out white people? And why are you not talking about the other? Is that everyone is it's going to become an endless loop unless you make it unequal. Because the only way this works, in theory, is if you single out a specific race or ethnicity, in this case white people. Because if you try to be equal about it, then the Japanese are going to have to pay reparations to the Chinese when they invaded, and at the same time the Chinese need to pay reparations when they had the war with Korea. And before that, what about the Mongols? When I talk about the kind of reparations the Mongols are going to have to pay. And what about Africans that did awful things to other Africans? Do they need not pay reparations? It just doesn't work. It would collapse in that way. But the thing is that they don't care, because this isn't a matter of equally treating people, even for something that doesn't make any sense, which is the idea of sins of the fathers onto the children, literally what we are talking about. But it's simply because they're trying to find an excuse for wealth redistribution patterns. They just want to take wealth from white people and redistribute it to black people, because they feel that it's right that way, because white people are too rich. Okay, what about Asian Americans then? Because they can, let me tell you, make a lot of money. Are we going to talk about redistributing some of the wealth that is in Muslim hands because of the oil? And that's without even addressing the statute of limitations of historical wrongdoings. It's ridiculous. Who qualifies? Recent immigrants? Mixed heritage? What about if it's half? What methods are you going to implement to correctly trace the lineage in order to determine culpability and eligibility? Phenotypic traits? You're going to be out of your mind. Administrative costs, potentials for fraud. Oh, and on that note, meaning fraud, did you hear about the BLM leader who is facing 450 years in prison on 20 counts of wire fraud and 5 counts of money laundering? Allegedly. This event seems to indicate that people in fact do use perceived social injustice on the basis of racial discrimination to, one would say, commit social injustice. And to be honest, 450 years, they could have rounded it up to half a millennium. Rolls off the tongue much better. Not to mention the injustice of mistreating one specific, singling out a specific ethnic group. So yes, it's complete utter nonsense. But the other thing that I want to focus on now is the concept of emotional manipulation, which is what this is. And it's insane and in fact sickening that we have to deal with emotional manipulation, not from an abusive partner, not from a political activist, although I mean, arguably, but from the very people that in theory were supposed to be the most neutral, scientific, and methodical of all. In fact, the one with the highest level of defenses from selective bias. Academics. Harvard, of all places. But here we are, my friends. If you appreciate my content so far and wish to help ensure my ability to continue to tell it how it is, regardless of any possible backlash, please support this channel on Patreon. Any support helps me and my team of academics keep the channel strong and gives us the means to fight back against the political rewriting of history. Stand with us, form the wall, defend the truth. All right, so what am I talking about when it comes to mental, not just mental manipulation, but specifically emotional manipulation? Well, what are they telling you? Let's analyze it. This group is telling you, oh, well, there is structural racism. Racism is bad, right? Can we agree? Okay, great. So racism. and towards black Americans, and they're dying. They're dying because of COVID, and it's your fault because you didn't say yes to give them that money with reparations. So they're dead, and it's your fault, and they are crying, and you didn't do anything about it. So say yes to reparations and agree with our politics. That is what this is. The core mechanics of emotional manipulation are actually quite simple to identify once you know how they work. Because what they are doing is that they are exploiting an already existing mechanism, human emotion. It could be fear, it could be compassion, it could be empathy, shame, guilt. All of these are candidates for potential emotional manipulation. Once a connection is established with one of these primal feelings that we as humans, some more, some less, feel, then the control of your behavior begins. And the reason why it's so effective is because it's supposed to trigger emotional responses in order to bypass your rational thought processes that would allow you to analyze events critically. So they tell you what we really want. The message is you need to say yes to reparations and take money from whites in order to give it to black Americans. But if we just tell you that, you're going to say no, because in their heads, you're racists, right? So what you're going to do is that they're trying to tell you, but these people are dying. Look how many people died, poor people. Oh, it's so awful during COVID-19. And it could have been prevented. And look at what you have done. All of these people hospitalized, and it's your fault. It's actually racial injustice when you mistreat one or single out one single group or whatever. So you're like, no, Metro, you're overreacting. It's in your head. Okay. Then explain why black is capital and white, or uppercase, and white is lowercase. You don't even have the decency to try and hide it anymore, because at this moment in time, it is 100% permitted, and in fact encouraged, to be disrespectful to one specific race, while at the same time respecting the other. So this is the dichotomy, superiority, inferiority, that characterizes racism. And because they know that, that's why they changed the nomenclature. Now they tell you can't be racist towards white people, because if they change the definitions in our dictionaries, which they have, by the way, and they're constantly doing, I'm preparing a dedicated video to expose all of that. Once they change it, then the split second you're like, but look at this. Then they'll tell you, you can't be racist to white people. So only white people can be racist to others. But I'm going to call them all out. Every single one of them. I'll be their bane. Our study simply gives yet another example of how racism gets into people's bodies and makes them sick. Who talks like this? Which can be added to this litany of evidence for reparation. This is people who are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and that's how they write. The study created a model of reparations. The crux of the research team's argument focuses on reparations. Yeah, we noticed that. Or payments to African Americans who descended from enslaved people. Good luck tracing that. If reparations work as proponents intend them to, I don't even want to know what that means. The payments could narrow the racial wealth gap, which would in turn narrow gaps in access to healthcare, housing, education, employment, and more. To model how reparations would have affected COVID-19 transmission, the researchers chose Louisiana, one of the states that reported COVID-19 cases by race at the beginning of the pandemic, and as a state where the population is still highly segregated between black and non-black residents, according to the study. Here's the thing, though. If you want to narrow the racial wealth gap, rather than just giving them free money by taking it from people that it's their money, how about you boost education, but they need to work for it. So there is for instance, you can have a certain number of, I don't know, if we have 100 scholarships in this university, now we have 1,000 scholarships in the university. Do not base them on DEI, because that's highly immoral. But since there is more access, study, prepare, do a test, and provide all of the books and data online for free. So that whether you be rich as Elon Musk or whether you be poor, you can sit down, take all of the data needed, all the books, all the stuff that you need, you take the time, you study, then you go in there, you take the test, you score high, good. Now you have a chance to get the scholarship so that then it will be paid for. And then we can increase the overall, and because once you have increased your education, you can get a better job. Once you have a better job, you can get better healthcare, you can have better housing, you can move to other areas, and that would fix it. But not with DEI, because that's nonsense, and absolutely not by giving people money. for no reason whatsoever, because that money, you see, that's one thing that I want to make clear. Whenever people say free something, free healthcare, which, by the way, I'm not against, I'd like to underline, but just so we are clear, it's a misnomer. There's no such a thing as free healthcare. There's no such a thing as free public transportation. It's paid for public transportation and paid for healthcare, which means someone else is paying for it, because that money needs to come from something. Now, we can discuss about how that could functionally be applied. Personally, I know that in America there is a strong idea whereby if you are pro-healthcare, that's a left-leaning idea, and if you are against the idea of having universal healthcare, I shouldn't say healthcare, universal healthcare, then if you're against it, then you're more of a right-leaning when it comes to that position. But back home in Italy, right and left are both pro-universal healthcare, so you can absolutely be 100% conservative. I am absolutely conservative in my ideas, both socially and economically. But when it comes to universal healthcare, it's still something that I think can be made to work. With that being said, it's not free. And now, whether or not it could work in America, which has like 350 million of a population, rather than Italy that has 70 million, I haven't got a clue, because I'm not someone who is into economics that much, and I don't know if that could be made to work. I'm not against the idea. Let's just stop calling it free healthcare, because it's not free. And in fact, we have to underline that, yes, in Italy we do have universal healthcare, which is a good thing, I personally believe, but taxes are pretty high, definitely higher than here in the States. And another problem with Italy universal healthcare is that, man, the queues and the conditions of the hospitals, it's like, yeah, you go to the freaking first aid, oh, you're gonna wait 5 hours minimum. So there is that. And again, the conditions of the facilities are terrible. They made their calculations with a model that would pay 250,000 in reparations per person, or 800,000 per household. They're out of their mind. Why does a household need almost $1 million? They also compared Louisiana and South Korea using infection data rates for the first 2 months of the epidemic. The researchers' model found that Louisiana took twice as long as South Korea to bring the R0 value below 1, the critical value at which an outbreak will die out in a population. Structural racism, blah, 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 disparities, white people bad, give us money, and that's the rest of your analysis. Extremely professional analysis. All right. When Biden took office last month, yeah, when Biden did that, didn't he? And what did he do for black people? Not much. He told, as far as I remember, he told black people, if you don't vote blue, you're not really black. That's one thing that I remember. And then another thing he did was to give a lot of money to illegal aliens rather than African-American citizens. But there is that. Harvard. Thank you for watching.